Thank you for watching videos by Jeff Sibelius and landandairphotos.com. Today I'm going to update my non-fanboy review of the Mavic Air 2 with some good and not so good updates to the drone's firmware and app. Before I go into the firmware and Fly App updates, I want to touch on one thing I didn't mention in the first review. That episode was extremely thorough, but I didn't cover every single feature the Mavic Air 2 has. If I tried to cover everything, that video would have been 45 minutes long and no one would have watched it. So I had to leave some things out. By the way, if you haven't seen the original non-fanboy review, follow the link in the upper right corner and watch it now. Anyway, the one feature that I should have mentioned in that review is the Mavic Air 2's manned aircraft warning system. When the app senses a manned aircraft in the area, you see a warning message and an aircraft icon on screen. If the aircraft gets too close, your controller cusses you out in Chinese about it. 载人飞机正在接近，请在安全高度飞行. I don't know what she's saying, but if I translated it to English, I'd probably get demonetized. Seriously, I like this feature. It's a smart warning to incorporate into the drone's safety system. Good on DJI for coming up with this idea. So let's talk about updates since the first review. In the past several weeks, DJI has released an update to the DJI Fly App and a firmware update for the Mavic Air 2. When these came out, I heard from people who said DJI had fixed most of the issues I identified in my first review. Not quite. Here's a list of most of the issues I raised about the Mavic Air 2 in my non-fanboy review. Now, we can assume that DJI will never fix the first or the last problems, but we all hope they can address the rest of the points I raised. With the release of version 1.1.6 of the Fly App and firmware update version 01.00.0340 in August, DJI has attempted to address two of the issues I identified. In addition, they added 3 new features to the app that I felt were worth mentioning to you here. These updates and new features are good for the most part, not entirely successful at times, and in one case, inexplicable. So, for the rest of this episode, I'm going to walk you through the new features and the updated features on the Mavic Air 2 and the DJI Fly App. And that'll give you a chance to see what works, what still needs some work, and give you a sense of how significant these updates are for how you would use the drone. For me, I think these are really significant changes for the most part. They're not perfect. They're not ready for prime time in some cases necessarily, but I think they've done a really good job of stepping up the game with this drone, which already was, as I said before, the best drone in 2020 for about 80% of the people out there. And incidentally, I'm using one of those new features right now to record this. I'm recording this on the Mavic Air 2. It's hovering away from me at about 18 feet. And that information alone is probably enough to tell you what feature I'm using, but if you don't know now, you'll know by the end of this video. So let's start this off talking about something I really dinged the Mavic Air 2 for, specifically the Fly App for, and that was the lack of controls for things like sensitivity for your sticks or your gimbal. If you've flown something like the Phantom 4 Pro or something like that, you know that the old Go 4 app had Expo settings where you could adjust the sensitivity of your sticks. So if you moved them in a small amount, you could change how aggressively the drone responded to those minor movements before you pushed it further along or all the way forward or back or whatever. The Fly App didn't have that with the Mavic Air 2, and a lot of people, myself included, thought that was a pretty bad oversight on their part. Should have had it. Well, they have added something not exactly the same as what you had in the Go 4 app, but they've come a long way with this, and that's the first set of features I'm going to show you now. If you click on the overflow menu and control and choose advanced gimbal settings, you see that we got a whole bunch of choices here. What we actually have are 4 sets of choices for each of the 3 power modes, and that is a great decision on DJI's part. What they've said is you can make these sensitivity settings for each power mode separately, which makes a lot of sense. You're going to want more aggressive stick response and gimbal response when you're flying in sport mode, and you're going to want a lot more sensitivity when you're doing something like flying in tripod mode. So they've done a really smart thing by breaking them out with the different power modes here. So let me show you what we have. I'm in normal mode, so we'll adjust these, but you have these same settings for all 3 power modes. So let's start with the first 2, which affect how the gimbal tilts up and down. First one is pitch speed. Pretty simple. How fast does the gimbal tilt? It starts at 1 degree per second as the slowest setting. And if you watch the screen, I'm tilting it. I have it all the way down and it's going really, really slow. Okay, I'll take it back up. So that's the slowest setting. Let's go back to the menu. Let's run that all the way up to 100 degrees a second. If I do it all the way down, wham. See how fast that thing goes? Well, if you're in sport mode, maybe that's what you want. But obviously in tripod mode or normal mode, you probably wouldn't want it that fast. I'm going to sit mine down around 20, somewhere around 20. I think that's a pretty good setting. It's nice and slow. It gives you a nice smooth, slow tilt to the camera, which should give you good quality video. Next one is pitch smoothness. This influences how aggressively the stick starts and stops its motions. So let me demonstrate it. I'm going to put it all the way at 0, so there is no smoothness here. So when I tilt the camera down and let go, it stops immediately. And tilt it up, stops immediately. Down, there is no play in the gimbal there. When you let go, it stops. That's not the most photogenic motion you might want, but again, if you're in sport mode, maybe that's more what you're looking for. So let's take this pitch smoothness all the way up to its maximum, which is 30. I don't know what that unit of measure is. It's 30. And now I'm gonna tilt this down, and I'll tell you when I let go of the wheel. Now, look at how far that drifted after I let go of the wheel. Bring it back up, let go, and it does it again. Notice how it also eases into the motion. So that's a really nice effect. That should give you good quality video. But taking it all the way up to 30 may not be what you want to do, because it could be hard to stop it exactly where you want. I want to stop it here, wait, oh, and it keeps going, So maybe that's too much. And obviously, if I take it all the way up to the top, can't go any further, wham, it stops. So obviously, when you reach the point where you can't go any further up or down, it stops immediately. There's no play in it. But otherwise, you do have that nice effect on your gimbal motion if you want it. I like a lot of it in my shot. I'm going to take mine down to about 20. So it has quite a bit of it. You decide what you want. Again, for each of your power settings, you can choose a different setting. So the next 2 settings influence how the drone yaws. So this plays with really your left stick and how it responds. So the first thing you can do is set your yaw rotation speed. I'm going to turn the other one off too, to make it easier to see. So yaw rotation speed, 20 degrees per second, is the slowest. Now I'm going to push the left stick all the way to the right. See how fast this thing spins. So it's still pretty fast, but again, I'm cranking this thing all the way to the left and all the way to the right. I'll let go. Now if I do it just a little bit, so if I do the stick just slightly, boy, you can get a nice slow yaw that way. Okay, So let's go back in here, and that's just for fun, show you how fast it can go. It's at 90 degrees per second. And now I'll push it all the way to the right. And it's like you're sitting in a merry-go-round or something. You probably don't want it that fast. Maybe you do for, you know, for sport mode or something, or for some particular effect, but that's the fastest. I like the slowest yaw setting. I'm gonna run mine all the way down to 20 degrees per second. You make up your mind what you want for you. Last one is yaw smoothness, and it works like the gimbal smoothness, except it influences how aggressively you start and stop your yaws, as opposed to starting and stop your gimbal turns. So I'm at 0 right now, which is no smoothness. So once I hit the left stick and start my yaw, it will start up immediately and stop immediately when I let go, like this. Start, let go, start, let go. Now let's take that all the way up to the top. Yaw smoothness. Here we go. I'm going to start, and now eased into it, let go, and it keeps turning. Start, ease into it, let go, and it keeps turning. Again, if you want to stop at an exact point, this is going to take some practice to getting used to, but it really does give you a nice look to your yaws, because it looks more natural for it to slowly start and then speed up. Like, I'll do it one more time here. I'm going to start. I'm going to push the stick all the way to the right, and then I'll let go. Start, let go, start, let go. So all in all, DJI has made a massive improvement when it comes to Expo type settings. They're not Expo, and they're not as thorough as the Expo settings. For example, if I wanted to control how slowly the drone would ease into a forward motion or a backwards motion or a slide to the right and left, you can't do that. So you don't have those types of settings, but they have come a long way in giving you control over the sensitivity and the subtleties of your motions, I guess for lack of a better word, for your gimbal and your yaws, and that's pretty cool. The next one is pretty simple, and it's a nice enhancement. If you look on screen, you can see it. On the upper right area, they have changed the way your battery percentage is displayed. Rather than those little itty-bitty white numbers, at least for the percent of battery left, it's showing a circle, a colored circle with a number in it. And as your battery diminishes, the circle will change number and the number decreases. So that's a little bit easier to see, a little bit more visible. If you tap on that thing, it also gives you numbers, estimates, I can say estimates, for how long it'll go before return to home, until a forced landing, and until the battery is completely dead and you're just SOL. So that's a nice feature as well. I think that makes this app a little bit more user-friendly. All of the displays are very small, so if they're not going to make them bigger, at least make them so they stand out against the sky a little bit better. I think that's definitely an improvement. Next thing I'm going to show you is the new safety setting that they've added to obstacle avoidance. If I go into my settings and under the safety tab, they've restructured this quite a bit. So now you have it, rather than turning APAS on and off, they have restructured this a bit. So now it says obstacle avoidance. You do one of three things. You can turn it off completely. Now it'll crash into anything you run into or you approach. If you tap on brake, that's more your traditional obstacle avoidance. So if it's coming up on something, it detects an obstacle, it will simply stop. And then bypass, and that's the new APAS system, where it will fly around the obstacle as opposed to just simply stopping. And I love that feature. I think it's a great feature. They have added something though. If I scroll down a little bit, we now have the option to disable sideways flight. And that means that the drone should not work when you try to move it laterally. When you try to move it horizontally, those features, those functions should be disabled. So let's test that out. I'm pushing the stick all the way to the right, and the drone is sitting there and just saying, on you. It's not doing anything, but if I push the stick forward or back, that works just fine. Get this a little further out and away from those trees. It's turned off. Let's turn the drone this way. We can rotate. We can move forward and back. But when I push the right stick to the left or right, the drone does not do anything. If I were to shut that off, the disable sideways flight, if I were to toggle that off, now if I push on the right stick, I can go sideways either way just as I could before. So this is a new safety feature they've added. I don't like it. It's almost inconceivable that you're going to do your entire flight in a straight line. So I don't understand the value of that unless you use it, you toggle it on and off for situations. For example, if I were going to be winding it through some between several tree trunks, and I didn't want it to go around the tree trunks for some reason, I don't know. I'm stretching for an excuse to use that feature. Incidentally, you'll see on the screen now there's a little icon over to the left, a green arrow with a circle in it. If I tap on that, now the sideways the sideways motion is enabled. You can move. If I tap on it again, now I can't. I move the stick to the side and the drone doesn't move. So you don't have to go into settings to do that, which is a nice thing. I just don't see a whole lot of value in that feature. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. All right, the next feature I'm going to show you is one that a lot of people are excited about, and that is the zoom function that they've added. Now this is not a digital zoom, this is a digital zoom. This is not an optical zoom like you get with the Mavic 2 Pro or Mavic 2 zoom, but it is a digital zoom depending on what resolution you're shooting at. If you're in 4K resolution, it goes from up to 2x, and if you're shooting in 1080p, it goes up to 4x. So that's pretty nice. And as I say, it is digital, but with that nifty little sensor they've got inside that can shoot up to 48 megapixel images, the quality of the digital zoom is supposed to be really good. Anyway, to access that, once you've got your firmware update and your app updated, you're all good to go. If you click on your camera settings, you see I'm currently in 4K, but now it says 4K wide. And if I scroll down, I've got another choice, which is 4K zoom. So let's choose that. I want this at 30 frames per second. And now you can see that next to my shutter, there is a little circle with a 1x in it. Let's start recording the drone. Drone's recording. Now, if I tap on that 1x, watch what happens. It automatically jumps up to 2x. I'm going to go back to 1x, and I'll show you another thing here. If you hold down the function button on your controller and then turn your knob, you can actually zoom in analog, I guess you would say, and get a really nice controlled zoom that way. That's a very nice feature. I like that a lot. That's a full zoom. I keep turning on and off my auxiliary light. Bring it back out. Okay, Let's stop the recording for a minute. Let's go back to the settings and jump it down to 2.7. Now I don't have two choices here for 2.7, do I? So as it turns out, I don't need it. I still have the zoom function for 2.7K. It is 1x. Oh wait, let's start recording. Okay, so now we're in 2x. We start recording. Here's 1x. There's 2x. And 1x. So again, like the 4K, you got 2x digital zoom in 4K, or in 2K, 2.7K. And if I hold down the function key, I still have that really nice zoom. Now, something I noticed here is how wide angle wide really is. So if I hit stop, now I'm going to change back to, here's 4K wide. And there's my scene. So it's the same as 2.7. But if I change to 4K zoom, even the 1K setting in zoom is more cropped in than the 4K wide. So keep that in mind. You might want to just leave it in 4K zoom all the time, so you've always got that at your disposal. But that does do some semblance of a crop on your shot, as opposed to, watch here, 4K wide. Keep that in mind. Scrolling down to 1080p. It's the same as the 4K wide and the 2.7. Let's tap on the screen here. We're in 1x. I'm going to start recording. This time, instead of 2x, we've got 4x zoom. Tap on that. Tap again. Tap again. Tilt back up. I gotta say, the hover on this drone is just remarkable. It's been sitting there all this time with the crosshairs on that light pole, and it hasn't drifted at all. I am just really amazed by the stability of this aircraft. It's really remarkable. So if I, and we'll test again, if I hold the function key and rotate the gimbal dial on the left shoulder, again you get that really pretty zoom out. Okay, if you hadn't already guessed it, the feature that I was using at the beginning of this video was the zoom. I'm using the 4x digital zoom and shooting at 1080p, and I'm shooting obviously on the Mavic Air 2 right now. And this is a nice feature because that obstacle avoidance, it gets real noisy as you move the drone closer. I am about 20 feet away, 25 feet away. I start moving this thing closer, and there it goes. Even if I turn off the obstacle avoidance, you still get the beep. So as I back that up, I can get it away. So I can still shoot a close-up, a relatively close-up shot of me, keep the drone far enough away so I avoid the beeping, and I'm good to go. One thing I didn't mention when I was shooting the review or the testing of the zoom feature is that it's not available in HDR. You have to be shooting in the other, I guess there is only one or two, there's two other color modes. You have to be shooting in one of those two modes to be able to use the zoom feature. It shuts off for HDR. So that's like the auto exposure lock, I believe. And that's too bad. I'd like to see the zoom and the auto exposure lock added to the HDR in future updates. So the zoom is great, still got some room for improvement. The next change that they've done is another one that just irritated the out of me, that hopefully they've fixed, we'll see, is they've adjusted how the drone starts in sport mode to keep the props out of the shot. Now, what I identified as a flaw or a fault in the previous iteration of this firmware was that the drone would drop if you push the stick full stick forward, particularly in sport mode. The gimbal would drop to, and it just really annoyed me that they did that. Some people told me that this was actually done by DJI intentionally to keep the props out of your shot. So they built in a flaw to how the gimbal performs to compensate for a design flaw in the aircraft, which is that the props end up in your shot. I just don't accept that as a logical decision on their part. So let's see if they've actually made things better again. So let's switch this into sport mode. Now, the gimbal's pointed straight forward. I'm going to jam the stick straight forward. Let's see if the gimbal drops. It does not. Hooray! The problem is solved. I'm going to put it forward again, put it out a little ways. We'll see if it does it as it's coming back like it used to. Bring it back. Let go of the stick. And there it did it. So they have partially fixed the problem. All right, here we go. Let's try it again. Jam the stick forward. Let go. Pull it back. Wait, I gotta go further. Yeah. So when you're going backwards and you let go of the stick, it still drops. So they have improved the problem, they haven't solved the problem. But I think they made a good step forward. Let's give them enough credit for that. Overall, I'm pleased with the updates DJI has incorporated into the Mavic Air 2 system. The company has continued to improve an already fantastic drone with features that make this drone an even better value than it was before. I'm very hopeful that DJI will continue to improve the Mavic Air 2 and knock more of the issues off this list. I said before that I thought the Air 2 was the best drone on the market in 2020 for about 80% of the drone pilots out there. And if they continue to improve this system as they've done so far, it may be the best drone of 2021 as well. So are you sitting on the fence about buying the Mavic Air 2? I'm not sure what you're waiting for. This is a remarkable drone. If you want to buy the Mavic Air 2, use the link in the description below. You'll get your drone direct from DJI, and you'll support my ability to make more videos like this for you in the future. I've got a playlist of videos on the Mavic Air 2 that's growing all the time. That playlist is on screen now. Be sure to watch these episodes. Before you go, please subscribe so you'll be notified when I publish again. And I really do appreciate your likes and comments, even from you fanboys. Thanks for watching.